Hello everyone, Brian Koval here, Biological Coordinator with Peninsula Stream Society here in the Greater Victoria area on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada. So I'm very pleased to bring to you today our third webinar in the month of November titled Beach Education and Conservation of Habitat Program, or as we call it, the Beach Program. Again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Sherwood Marine Center, and I'd just like to guide your attention to the photo on the right. Now that's Morgan, one of our beach surveyors, looking for forage fish eggs on the beach, which we'll get to a little later on in the presentation, but essentially passing on his knowledge to his son. I thought this was just a great picture to kind of set the mood for this presentation, which is all about community stewardship and beach education. So you'll find today the outline of today's webinar down below. I'll leave that for your reading pleasure, but just above it you'll see quite a cool photo. A lot of volunteers who undertook a cleanup, and this was actually what's called the Seam Harbor Beach Cleanup, where we cleaned 6 different beaches in Sydney and North Saanich, and even had a special guest, Santa Claus, which is a great opportunity to have the students out to come get that last ask into Santa before the big day. So this is our beach and creek cleanup location map for 2019 to 2020. Cleanups are made possible through continuing funding through the TD, Friends of the Environment Foundation, so thanks very much to them. And there's a few cleanups that have been highlighted on here. And I just want to let you know that please stay tuned because we are planning some more COVID-safe cleanups into the future. This is the Coles Bay cleanup. You'll notice no one's wearing a mask, and that's because it was in February before the onset of COVID. You'll see a couple banners, but quite a good turnout to go clean up the beach. And this is what it looked like. As you can see, we supply buckets so that sharp objects won't break through the garbage bags, and as well, it'll minimize how many garbage bags we actually use. Here you can see a leaf blower, which we can actually put in reverse and turn into what I call a leaf blower vacuum. And what we do with that is we suck up styrofoam beads that are a product as floats break down along the beach. Now, this vacuum is not quite perfect. It does suck up quite a bit of styrofoam, but does leave some bits behind. Really, the best method to to stop the styrofoam being on the beach is to prevent its use. So another cleanup we had is this one here with Marigold Elementary School students, where we undertook a cleanup, showed them how to do a beach survey, and also went on a nature walk. It was a great way to spend time in Gorge Park and also clean up some shorelines with some eager young minds. This is our first cleanup we undertook, and this was after the onset of COVID. And as you can see, our volunteers are all in their own bubbles, spread apart, and we also got them to wear masks when working closely together, sanitize tools, as well as use hand sanitizer, and mostly just kept our wits about us and kept numbers fairly small. And this one was a great cleanup. We teamed up with the TELUS Green team and cleaned up Brentwood Bay Beach. Another cleanup we did just in October was the Lillian Hoffar Beach cleanup. Another activity we had this day was to have a forage fish egg beach survey demonstration. So we showed the methods to the team of volunteers who are cleaning up the beach in order to gain support for the program. And this is sort of what it's all about. If you have a look, you'll see basically a dumpster full of a diversity of materials. And this was on Pat Bay, where we had 62 volunteers remove about 1,200 kilograms of garbage and recyclable material. So definitely thanks to all those who helped move all that. All right, so here we have a map of our forage fish egg beach surveys that we've been undertaking in the Greater Victoria area. So the big question that people ask me is, well, what are we surveying for? Well, we're looking for forage fish eggs, as mentioned before. They spawn on sandy gravel beaches, and we do the surveys by collecting samples of this sandy gravel from the beach and finding the eggs under a microscope. Now you'll see a number of beaches here highlighted. The ones in yellow are areas where we successfully found surf smelt eggs. And if you're wondering what a surf smelt looks like, please stay tuned until the next slide. So, you'll see there's a lot of beaches, so this might be a lot for one person to get to. So what we've done is developed a survey network, a diversity of groups all over the Greater Victoria area, really honed into their specific region. And that way we're able to collect more data and basically just get more surveys done. We're also working with other groups in British Columbia, World Wildlife Fund, Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, or MABRI as we call them, Project Watershed, Parks Canada, Pacific Salmon Foundation, and others. And this will actually maximize our survey efforts in the province. Because what we want to do is determine when and where these fish are spawning, so we can use this as a tool to better restore and protect our beaches into the future. And Washington State, just down south, have actually been collecting data for decades, so they're well ahead of us. And they have actually been using their data to protect and restore beaches already. Now, Ian Bruce and myself actually went down to Anacortes in Washington a couple years ago to learn from Philip Dion, who's doing these surveys down in Washington State, and we're able to bring that knowledge back to Canada and pass it on to our volunteers and others. So this is what the forage fish look like. The ones that we look for on the beach, or their eggs rather, are Pacific sand lance as well as surf smelts. And that ruler on top is in inches just as reference, so you get an idea of the size of these critters. Alright, and you might be wondering, well, why survey for forage fish and why are they so important? Well, they're a very important component of the marine food web. Look at where they are, right at the center, essentially eating plankton and converting it to an energy source that the larger predators can eat that you see above. So, now we're getting into the actual surveys. So you kind of know what the forage fish look like. And we're going to be looking for eggs. And as reference, an egg is about the size of a grain of sand. So essentially we need to collect the samples so we can look at them under the microscope. And here we are laying out 4 quadrats. So essentially so we can collect an even amount of material from each section. Again, this is what that collection of sand looks like. Here they're using a plastic bag to put it into. You can also use containers. And here's Wendy, who works Peninsula Streams and World Fisheries Trust, collecting some sand from the beach, just randomly taking it from many spots in that quadrat. Now this is kind of what it looks like after you've collected all that sandy gravel. As you can see, it's quite full, and this might take quite a long time to look at underneath the microscope. So we actually borrow some techniques from the gold mining industry. Here you can see Parks Canada staff as well as Jacqueline from World Wildlife Fund. And this was actually the day where we trained the Parks Canada staff to do these surveys, and we'll be working with them into the future. What you can see is she's pouring water through that green sieve, and what we want to do is remove some of the large material, so what we end up with is a smaller sample. Now, we certainly reduce the sample, but it would still take quite a while to look at all that under a microscope. So we have another instrument. This is called a blue bowl. It works as a vortex where it spins the water around and the lighter material floats up and goes down through the center where it's caught by this sieve. And the heavier material will stay at the bottom of the blue bowl. And here's another team using that blue bowl. You need to use that spatula to really stir up the sample to make sure you get those eggs floating. And again, here at Cordova Bay. And then finally, this is essentially what you're left with. A lot easier to look at under the microscope. All right, so now that we have this sample, let's have a look and see what they look like under the microscope. So this is a surf smelt egg. And this is quite obvious to me because over here you can see the peduncle, and it's kind of like a sticky arm that they use to attach to sediment, like sand. You'll see that sand lance are actually sticky on all ends, so they can have material stuck on all sides. But you can also see the eye developing right here. And this was found at Tryon Beach. So we were looking at this sample, and lo and behold, we found this empty egg. So we started thinking, this is empty. We wonder if they went out to sea, or maybe they're in our sample. So lo and behold, there you go. That's a surf smelt. And if you look right here, you'll see the yolk sac, similar to when salmon are born. So they can slowly absorb that yolk sac once they leave the egg. Here we go. So here's a couple surf smelt eggs. You'll see how they're attached to these grains of sand here. And then here you have 2 eggs attached to one larger grain of sand. And the big question I always get is, well, what does it look like when they're spawning? Do they spawn during the day? Do they spawn at night? Well, today I have some video for you so you can get an idea of what this looks like. There they are, hard at work. You can see them wiggling around. And just as reference, this is daytime. That's a higher tide, so a good time for them to be spawning. So you can see. And here's another video of them spawning at night. So, and this is just one more video of them spawning. Quite exciting. And of course, once they spawn, the tide will go out, and that's when we can undertake the survey to try to find those eggs. All right, so now we're going to move into what's called beach nourishment. Now, beach nourishment is where you add material, sand, gravel, and the likes to beaches, and it's aesthetically more pleasing, protects against erosion and sea level rise, and it's also good material to spawn in for our forage fish. So these are just the 3 locations that we'll be talking on in terms of nourishment. All right, so another question I often get is, how does material get onto the beach? Well, with this photo, you'll see the bluff in the background. And now, over time, the erosion of the bluff provides sediment to the beach. This finer material is lost offshore, but pebble and sand remains to create the beach. But if we protect the bluff and prevent that erosion from happening, the material can't naturally accumulate onto the beach. So what you can be left with is a very hard or rocky beach, or it can even be quite mucky. So that's why we like the technique of using more of a soft shores method, which if you're familiar with the Green Shores program, which we'll dive to in a few minutes, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But essentially, rather than having hard structures along the shores, we could have a sloped bank with some vegetation that helps dissipate the power of the storms and just looks quite a bit better. And you'll see this later on in the Green Shore slides. All right, so now let's talk about Todd Inlet Beach Nourishment. So, the Todd Inlet Beach Nourishment Project was undertaken back in 2017 by Sea Change, and we helped them out with the project. Now, this site that you're looking at right here, this is the before shot, it was historically a cement plant. Now, Scuba divers who've gone down into the inlet before the restoration say that it was almost like scuba diving on the moon. It's void of those critters. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot of contamination. So before we did any nourishment, you don't want to just put clean material on top of dirty material. We wanted to strip it first. So this will give you an idea of what that stripping looks like. And of course, we had to have the snowy weather for this project. Made it more challenging, but made for some great photos. So yeah, essentially stripping that material at this point. Now, the next question is, how do you get all this material to the beach? Well, I'll show you. Here comes the barge. So the tugboat's pulling in the barge that has the material for the beach on it. And at the end of the video, I'll just show you again. You'll see another barge, and you'll see that conveyor to put the sand material onto the beach so the machines can distribute it. And here you can see the barge and the big piles of material, as well as the excavator moving it around. And this is what it looked like after. You can see we added sand, we added gravel, and it's just a very beautiful beach. And since then, critters have started to come back, things have been starting to grow, and it's a nice place to go and see kids playing on a beach that's not contaminated, that won't make them sick. So this is very much a win-win-win. Sea Change did just absolutely fantastic job, and I recommend a visit to this beach. So now we're going to talk about Patricia Bay Nourishment. You see the arrows pointing to the particular part of the beach where we worked. You'll see Secum First Nation as well as Victoria International Airport. Now, this project happened because the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure had to protect the shoreline along West Saanich Road because the road was eroding away. They talked out of building a seawall, instead placed sloped riprap, but unfortunately, hard shores still erode beaches. Now, this beach runs adjacent to Secum First Nation, who have essentially watched many areas of their beach disappear. So they definitely had some stakes in the project and helped with the backshore planting. And unlike Todd Inlet, couldn't bring in the material by barge as it's just too shallow. So instead, dump trucks were brought around with all the material. And I just want to note the material we brought was appropriate for forage fish spawning. And another important thing to note is just the fact that we've found surf smelt eggs in the material that we added as a nourishment project. So quite happy about that. Alrighty, so this is Pat Bay Beach. If you look in the front here, you'll see some of that harder material. The sand has eroded away and it's quite hard. And you'll see those big piles, sandy gravel that the excavator is going to move around. And here they are working again. You'll see a dump truck driving up and down the beach. Very important to work around the tides in this situation. And this is what it looks like after. Beautiful, placed logs, planted backshore. Of course, that was with Secum First Nation. And yeah, just a beautiful beach, and forage fish are spawning here. So, phase one of this project was undertaken in 2012, where 800 tons of material was added. Phase 2 was in 2015 with 2,250, and phase 3 was in 2018. The photo that you're looking at here was from that year, and 4,000 tons of material was added. So this is Hospital Creek Beach, and this is a test nourishment site, the thing that kind of looks like a sandbox. What we've done here is partially nourish the beach in that sandbox. Those sidings will be removed, and this area will be monitored over the winter to see how the material disperses. There I am with some survey equipment determining the volume of that sandbox so we can redetermine the volume at the end of the season and see just what's changed. Now, this will be a great example of how to protect against backshore erosion and sea level rise as nourishment is. Alrighty, so Green Shores program. It's a great program, like I mentioned before. You take these hard structures, remove them, make it more sloped and add some vegetation, and you're left with something more like this. Just have a look. It's better looking, it prevents erosion, it's a great place just go relax. It's basically a win-win-win. So this is more of what we want to see as opposed to this. And on the beach here, you can supply material that forage fish can spawn in for more of that habitat. So at this point, I'd just like to thank all our funders and partners, quite a few on this project. And we're all striving for the same thing, to improve the state of our shorelines. And at this point, I'd just like to open it up for any questions, and thank you for listening today.